Hey there, today we're gonna look at something a little out there. Yeah, even for us, but it's something that, if true, could spark such a massive paradigm shift for all of humanity. It could rewrite the history books and completely change our understanding of energy and the world itself. Today, we're looking at pyramids. Besides the fact that pyramids are just cool, what scientists are discovering today are the implications of the pyramidal shape itself and the curious energetic effects that are observed when studying these amazing structures. As always, I humbly ask that you come with an open mind as we dive into this very curious phenomenon. Way back in the 1970s, the pyramid power movement exploded for a very short period of time. It was the idea that the pyramids of Egypt could be harnessing some kind of unknown or mysterious cosmic power, and was quickly laughed off by skeptics as a brief moment of gullible behavior on everyone's parts. But the idea was very popular in specific circles, especially those who believed that aliens or giants had helped to build the pyramids in the first place. Or maybe giants building them with the help of aliens? Anunnaki Nephilim giant slave builders? Anyway, a lot of the original excitement came from the story of a Frenchman named Antoine Bovis, who apparently visited the Great Pyramid in the early 20th century. According to the story in many of the 1970s pyramid books, Bovis found a garbage can in the king's chamber with the bodies of dead cats and other animals in it. But apparently, they weren't decomposing or smelling bad at all. In fact, just like the pharaohs, they had been dried out and mummified almost perfectly. People were quick to jump on the bandwagon though, and began to easily pick holes in the story. Aside from basic science telling us that aridity helps to preserve or slow down decomposition, for one, both big-time excavators and the Egyptian Antiquities Board pointed out that there had never been a trash can inside the pyramid, as it would have interfered with research. Further, it came to light that Bovis actually had never even left France. It turns out that he actually just built a mini wooden model of the Great Pyramid in his backyard and apparently managed to mummify a dead cat in there himself, and people had misinterpreted the experiment. Once word of Bovis's real experiment began to spread across Europe though, it was picked up by a man named Karel Durbal in Prague in 1949, who experimented further and claimed that razor blades placed inside model pyramids would hold their sharpness for much longer, or even sometimes resharpen. In fact, he was so sure of it that he applied to the Czech government for a commercial patent to sell these pyramid machines in grocery and hardware stores. Seriously, we'll leave a link to the official patent in our sources. But like any sane government department, the patent office in Prague refused to honor Durbal's request to process his discovery until their chief scientist could get the same results. But then things got weird because he actually succeeded and Durbal got his patent. Now, Durbal was a radio engineer and had no idea how the pyramid shapes were working. He just knew that they did. He theorized that his device would focus the Earth's magnetic field, although he did not make it clear how this would work or whether the device's shape or materials were related to the effect. Interestingly, the idea of magnetics playing a role in the sharpness of razors wasn't new to the pyramid craze. Since the 1930s, British newspapers had been receiving letters from tons of people claiming that when they put their razors in their bathroom on a certain axis or direction, that they could be used for much longer and provide a better or closer shave. The reason for this is that the magnetic fields either help to point the razor's edge on a molecular level in alignment with the razor or away from it. And it seems as though the pyramids were somehow affecting the magnetic fields of the blades too. So this was a phenomenon that was already well in the public mindset for decades before the idea of pyramid power ever came out. Truthfully, no one really knows who discovered this whole thing, but someone who made leaps and bounds in wireless energy transfer and electricity was, of course, everyone's most favorite underappreciated physicist, Nikola Tesla. Now, Tesla, the dude, not the car, deserves his own video entirely, or several movies, I don't know. But needless to say, he's often been described as one of the greatest minds of the scientific age, along with having a reputation for mad science and bridging the gap between metaphysics and regular physics, which, I mean, come on, let's face it, we need more of that today. Of all of his incredible inventions, which for the most part influenced like 80% of our technology today, his Tesla Tower or Wardenclyffe wireless energy transfer is probably his most famous. His generators and tech are very mysterious and nobody quite knows how they were going to work, but the essential idea was that they would allow the sharing of energy wirelessly from anywhere a tower was set up. One theory about how this would have worked was that it was designed to tap into the ionosphere of the Earth, a current of electrically charged particles in the atmosphere, to provide free electricity to wherever the resonators were. See, Tesla thought the Earth acted like a huge natural generator, spinning on its magnetic poles and generating an electrical charge that he thought could be tapped into to provide free and renewable energy. There are a lot of rumors around the internet that Tesla was fascinated by the pyramids and even based some of his designs off of their structures, like his so-called electromagnetic pyramid. A common phrase you'll hear in some Tesla conspiracy sites is that when he created his generators, he placed them in certain positions according to the laws of where the pyramids of Giza were built, related to the relationship between the elliptical orbit of the planet and the equator. The problem is, this is only half right, and yet it's still spread as truth. The orbit of the Earth around the sun has nothing to do with traditional energy transmission here on Earth. Instead, I think this is another misunderstanding. See, his free energy generators were placed according to the location of the Great Pyramid, sure, but the law being referred to is that they had to be located on top of aquifers or water sources just as the Great Pyramid was, with the theory being that the running water would act as a natural conductor on one side of the circuit. On one hand, I can see how people might be skeptical about this idea, especially since even Tesla made mistakes in physics before. But some new research published in the Journal of Applied Physics recently showed that the Great Pyramid was actually capable of concentrating electromagnetic energy and waves in its internal chambers and under the base, where the so-called hidden chamber should be. This is a huge deal, as it seemingly theoretically proves that the pyramid could act as a form of resonator. The team are even using the results they got to design nanoparticles capable of reproducing similar effects in the optical range, which could be used to develop sensors and highly efficient solar cells. In more ways than one, I guess we can say pyramids are the science of the future. Shortly after Tesla's suspicious death in 1943 though, his research and devices disappeared, ironically being analyzed and studied by President Trump's uncle. Yeah, there's a whole conspiracy about that actually. The Trump family may be time travelers, but we'll have to cover that at some point later on. But anyways, any notion of the pyramids being related to energy completely disappeared until the 70s. In the 90s and early 2000s though, there was a new explosion of interest when a Russian engineer named Alexander Golod began building his own pyramid models in Russia and the Ukraine, and this is where things get really interesting. Originally, he made them all corresponding to the phi ratio and out of fiberglass and PVC pipes, as he said that any metal would interfere with the conduction inside, a point that is very often overlooked by skeptics. His results were out of the ordinary though, and very, very real, so much so that Golod's pyramids attracted a lot of attention, specifically from high-level scientific authorities in Moscow. Even today, the effects of his pyramids are endorsed and supported by the Russian Academy of Medical Sciences. So what are these so-called effects? From medicines becoming more effective, to crops producing greater yields, and even the atmosphere cleaning up around the Russian pyramids, it's crazy. And you can check out the link in our sources to see the full range of studies and effects. But needless to say, wherever the pyramids are, the surrounding environment not only grows better, but anything stored inside of them undergoes some kind of change that also makes it better. Don't believe me? Seriously, just check out this clip from Associated Press showing the effects in action.
Хорошо видно, что это чистая вода. Вот она переливается, пузырьки. Стряхиваем. И хорошо видно, как в бутылке идет медленная кристаллизация.
Medicines were given an almost 3,000% boost. Mice injected with typhoid survived in greater numbers when inside the pyramid. Oil became easier to drill. And some people have even said that impotence and women unable to bear children could miraculously conceive after some time in the pyramids. The effects don't just seem to be limited to the interior of the pyramid though, as things seemingly charged in the structure also hold their effects even after being taken out. Interestingly, Dr. Golod also conducted studies of the air above the pyramid with various devices and saw some weird results. For one, a column of unknown energy was detected around the pyramid, some 500 meters wide and 2,000 meters tall. But further investigation seemed to show that it was even larger, stretching to 300 kilometers wide. Golod's team calculated that if electrical energy were used to create such a massive disturbance in the atmosphere, You would need every single power plant in Russia running at full blast to do it. Furthermore, an ozone hole that was directly over the pyramid closed up only 2 months after they built it. If you want to look at all of these studies and examples, you can check out the book, The Source Field Investigations by David Wilcock, as he has an entire chapter dedicated to exploring all of this. Now, I know this all sounds like hogwash. After all, it goes against most of the laws of classical physics. There's no way a simple shape or building can have that kind of effect. And if there really was anything to it, why wouldn't they have built something like it here in the West? The Washington Monument. Excuse me, just something in my throat here. Seriously, maybe there's a reason for it. But actually, even purely scientifically speaking, pyramids are interesting shapes. Pyramid-shaped magnets, for example, create a fixed focal point in the field, and the pyramidal shape tends to exhibit fractal energy much more than any other shapes. So even naturally, there's some weird geometry going on. But even with all of this stuff so far, I'm certain skeptics and materialist scientists could potentially throw this away by saying that the effects are purely psychological, ignoring the healthier ozone, diminished violence in prison, and viscosity of oil as conspiracies, of course. So the question then is, are there any studies that produced measurable effects that could be replicated? And actually, yes. So for all of the scientists out there watching this, check this out. Do you remember that thing that started this all off? The idea that razor blades could be sharpened inside the pyramid shape? Well, a Ukrainian scientist, Dr. This actually repeated the original experiment with modern scientific equipment and proved with scanning electron microscope photography that the pyramid shape was actually able to change the molecular structure along the cutting edge of a razor blade. Unlike what D'Urville seemed to have discovered though, a north-south alignment did not necessarily make a fresh razor blade any sharper. However, an east-west position had a clear, measurable dulling effect on the blade, transforming its straight, flat surfaces into a lumpy, bumpy, wave-like curve on a microscopic level, which can be seen in his paper in the description. More recently, an experiment by Dr. Crash and some others found that the pyramid shape could also affect electrical currents that were run through it by building a pyramid approximately 3 meters high and running an electrical current through the interior and to the exterior surrounding the area. The interior of the pyramid somehow excited the current. When the current was measured again outside the pyramid, it was found to have been excited by nearly 4 times. In other words, if you were to introduce 1 kilowatt of energy inside the pyramid, you could potentially extract 5 kilowatts from the outside. Imagine a world where everybody's house just had a mini pyramid in the backyard to increase their household power efficiency. Now, Dr. Crash Naholovitz, hey, I did it, and his team at the Great Pyramid Research Association have been putting out papers and articles every year and coming up with some really interesting theories about why and how the pyramid actually works and the theory behind its workings, which we encourage you to go and read for yourself if you're interested. As you can probably imagine though, a full conversation about the quantum mechanics, inertian fields, and paradigm shifting science behind this would take up another playlist of videos. And so in this particular video, we're not going to cover it in crazy depth. But to give you a very simple version though, the research seems to suggest the existence of another type of field around the Earth that is generated by the friction of a moving particle in the ether. And by ether, since most scientists today don't believe in that sort of thing, what that means is a modern day quantum vacuum. Atoms then interact with the field to produce a type of wave that flows depending on the rotation of the Earth from west to east and on its orbit around the sun. The paths passed by these waves are in a certain type of ratio, so any object that satisfies the correct dimensions of which a pyramid is the most common, and has the correct orientation can act as a resonator that focuses the field or the waves. Now the keen-eyed in our audience may point out though, hang on, if ratio is so important and the Great Pyramid is the perfect ratio, why do the Russian pyramids even work at all if they're so much steeper or longer? This itself is very interesting because perhaps the Russian pyramids don't work as well as they should, or at least could. See, when it comes to pyramids, there are generally 3 types. A sharp pyramid, like the ones found in Russia and the Washington Monument, the perfect pyramid, like the ones at Giza, and an obtuse pyramid, like the bent pyramid. Following Dr. DeSalvo and Crash Naholovitz's theory, a sharp pyramid may not be able to keep the waves contained inside the chamber properly, and may instead act as a radiator or be interacting with the field in the upper atmosphere, which would explain its effect on the ozone layer high above it. Alternatively, an obtuse pyramid is theorized to do the opposite and radiate the accumulated waves downward into the earth. Thus, the perfect pyramid, like the one at Giza, is kind of like the golden ratio, acting as the happy medium, being able to contain and use the waves most effectively. Unfortunately, until such a study is carried out in the Great Pyramid itself, we won't know this for sure, but it's certainly fun to think about. This is potentially the modern day theory behind the pyramid power phenomenon, that somehow the pyramid shape focuses this field, which is already around us, into a usable form that has a noticeable effect. It is theorized that these waves somehow increase the oscillation of electrons in a circuit and gives them more of a push or more energy to work with, which is what accounts for that extra energy output. Now, we're not saying this is entirely how this works, or even that we fully understand it ourselves. The Great Pyramid is such a mystery, with such precision in its ratio and even seeming alignments with Orion's belt, that what it was built for is still elusive to us today. Although we have theorized about this before, including in the human history movie and the Sumerian epic. But what is most interesting is that all of this information and demonstrable effects of the pyramid shape definitely warrants a comprehensive further study on the topic without prejudice from the scientific community. Dr. John DeSalvo and his team at the Giza Pyramid Research Association have proposed a project to measure the interior of the Great Pyramid to assess it for different types of fields, in the hope that they can prove that this is in fact a resonator for a new kind of field, and we're really excited to see the results. Just think of what kind of advancements could be made in medicine, construction, well-being, and a whole host of other stuff in our society if we had a pyramid in or around every city, or pyramids in our farmlands helping crops to have better yields. It's hard to imagine a world where diseases could be cured and violence could be lessened, especially right now, but maybe this new and strange science is the first step to get there. Now, to close out this video, I want to share with you a special vision of mine. Ever since I first learned about this stuff, probably 6 or 7 years ago, I've had a dream of building a pyramid-shaped spirit center. I envisioned some kind of large community gathering place that would serve as a garden, a library, a community center, and maybe even a healing center, a sacred space for people to gather, learn, meditate, and all kinds of things like this. If we could build just one, if it was a success, we could begin building them all over the country and then the world, serving humanity to create a deeper connection with ourselves and the earth in a holistic way. This is a dream of spirit science, and we fully intend to see it through. Ever since we started talking about this, we've seen a lot of support from many of you in wanting to help to be a part of this vision. And so today, we've created a special opt-in email list for updates about the Spirit Center, along with other updates we may have. If you wanna be notified specifically about the Spirit Center, use the link at the top of the comments to sign up for updates and information as we begin making progress towards this vision. Thank you so much for watching. And for those who are still skeptical of the whole thing, I encourage you to go and build your own mini Giza pyramid model and try this for yourself. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time on Spirit Science.